Welcome again, everyone, to this another session, second concept on day five. Okay, so today we'll be discussing two key concepts: the primary key and the foreign keys. Right. So in our previous session, we talked about the common key that we use in our join clause. However, what are the things to watch out for in this common key? Okay, and that is what is bringing us to this concept. And again, I'm just going to be using the slide to be able to demonstrate to be able to demonstrate this concept so we can really understand it clearly. Okay, so now the primary key is one of the keys that we use for as a common key for the join clause. Now, focusing on the primary key, it could either be a column or a set of columns that uniquely identifies each record in a table. And what it does is that it ensures entity integrity by uniquely identifying the record. Now, let's take an example. In the product table that we've been looking at, one thing you can see here is that you see, first of all, it says PK. PK simply means primary key. And what that simply means is that this ID or this identifier represent a product in this fictitious company. So for example, headset ball bearing is being mapped to number 4, and then every information about this number 4 is going to be describing the headset ball bearing. What do I mean? So other attributes here will be like product number, color, which is talking about the same product. So at the very granular level is at the product level. The same thing with the 771, 772, 773. And so each record is representing a product that this company produces. Now, what are the characteristics to check for when you're looking for PK? Now, in some of the modern ETL work or data warehouse or lakehouse environment, it may not explicitly call it out for PK. So what are you supposed to check for? Okay, so these are some of the properties to check for. Okay, number one, our PK must be unique for every record, right, and cannot contain null values. And like I mentioned, it could either be one column, which is going to be a primary key, and if it's a set of columns, it's we call it a composite key. However, those set of columns must uniquely identify a record in that table. Now, in our current data warehouse or server or lab, is we have some PK. For example, product ID here is a PK, address ID is a primary key, or customer ID is a primary key. Okay, and we're gonna do some demo to see how do we check for to make sure that these characteristics are satisfied to qualify a record or a column or multiple columns for as a PK. Now let's quickly dive into foreign keys. Now, foreign keys is basically that primary key being referenced in another table. In other words, the table that contains this key now is not the original generator or the original table where this key is stored. So it's basically, it's like you travel to another country, right, and then you are living in that country. So at that time you are a foreigner to that country, right? The same thing if you if if you have a foreign key in a table, it basically means that it is not originated from that table and it is living in another table. Okay, and what it does is that it maintains referential integrity between two tables by creating a relationship. Now let's take an example, our sales sample, for example, right? And this really take care of at the very level, it give us information about the items, right, that are being purchased at the time that the customer is placing an order. Now this product key doesn't originate from this sales table. Okay, it originated from the product table. However, it's been referenced in this sales table, and that's what I mean, that it's been living in another country, in another table in this case. And so what are the characteristics of a foreign key? Now, some of the characteristics we should check for is that sometimes it can contain, it could be unique, but at the same time it can contain duplicate values. It can also contain non-values, and also it could have that a table can actually have multiple foreign keys. We're going to see some examples, right? And these are some of the examples in our current lab, on our current data. Okay, so now that we have an idea of what primary key and foreign keys are, let's quickly go back to our lab and check and to make sure we really understand this concept. Now, for this example, so yeah, I'm going to call it primary key, and I'm going to be using the product table to demonstrate the primary key. So let's say select star from, and then let's go back to production tables, and then we go back to our product. Okay, and then let's run this. Okay, now some of the things you can quickly see here is that number one, you can see the PK, which tells us that this key, this column, is our primary key. However, how do we check to make sure that those characteristics we talk about is been this column satisfy those characteristics? So one of the key things to check for is a uniqueness, right? Which makes sense, right? Like if two keys are representing one product, and then we have different values, how can you be able to identify that particular product? So it's very, very key from the business point of view. Now let's quickly see what we can do here to be able to make sure that this satisfies the characteristics of a primary key. Now we've gone through this before, but I'm just going to quickly run the code. And some of you might, for those that are just watching this video, this episode, the first in the series we have right now, I want to encourage you to go back and you'll be able to understand where all of these are coming from. But for those that have been following, let's quickly go through this. We can say product ID, and then we do a count. All right, and then we do group by one, and then we'll say order by. Let's start with order by 2 in descending order. So this tells us that if 1 is the highest value, that means it's unique. Okay, so when we run we can see 1 is the highest value. Yeah, that means that this product satisfy our PK characteristics. Now another way we can check this is to use our having clause, and we'll say count greater than 1. So if it returns no value, then that means it's correct. So you can see it returns no value, meaning that there is no ID that has multiple records, which is great, which is what we want. Okay, this is how you typically make sure that your PK is what you expect, right? You always want to check before you even start some joining, except if you are 100% confident, then you don't need to worry, but you need to check for the data integrity. Okay, all right, now let's go to the foreign key. Let's call this foreign key, and let's also see how we can validate and make sure that this is the foreign key characteristics are being met. So for this purpose, we're going to use the sales order details. So I'm just going to write the query here, and then let's go back to our sales. I think I have it somewhere here. I'm just going to drop it in, and let's quickly run that, and you can see we have the PK here as well. And so that means that every record is going to be unique if you use this ID, right? However, our focus now is the foreign keys. You can feel free to check that. Similar to what we did for the primary key, you will find out that it works as expected. Now, some of the characteristics of primary key we talked about is that we could have multiple primary keys in a particular table. So in this case, you see sales order ID is a foreign key here. Product ID is a foreign key here. Special offer ID is a foreign key here. So you can see we have three foreign keys within this table, which explains the characteristics of foreign keys. Now also we did say that we could also have duplicate as well. So let's run the same similar code that we ran for the primary key for this foreign key check, and let's see what happens. So we should expect duplicate. So let's quickly run that, and let's copy all of this. We don't need to rewrite the query again, so we save some time. Okay, so I'm just first of all going to, okay, we can leave it as it is, and let's run this. Okay, now when you run this, you can see right here that 870 as a product has over 4,000 different records, which is expected for the nature of this table, but it also further validates the fact that this is what we should expect, right? The other way we can do this, like we did two different methods in the primary key check, is that we can just comment these out and then run this as well. You can see that in this case, you are having multiple records for one particular product, which is what we expect. However, just to point out for clarity purposes, when you remove having, that means that this data itself can still contain just product ID that just have one record. Okay, just if I do, like, let's say for example I do ascending, just to buttress my point here, you will see it will have, there might be some that have one record. In this case we don't see anyone, but just to tell you that this is just for basic check, right? So you don't want to do that if you're trying to eliminate a duplicate record. Okay, all right, so this is where we're gonna stop for now in this particular concept explanation. I hope you get a good idea of what the difference between primary key and foreign key, and you tie it back to the joins that we talked about, and to be able to help you understand that when you're looking for common keys, you should know what to look for. When it's a primary key and foreign keys, you should know how to deal with that. All right, I hope this has really helped you to further clarify your doubt and give you some fresh perspective and understanding of some of this concept. If you found this really helpful, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And if you have questions, put it in the comment section, and we'll be more than happy to provide answers as we can. All right, thank you so much for watching this session, and I will see you in the next one.